Thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate your guys' attendance today. Um, we're doing a little sneak preview on the Interpening program, the Art of the Cannabis Sommelier. We're going to be coming out to Michigan the weekend after next. A little Detroit, Grand Rapids, Lansing trip, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And you guys will be able to take this class if it's something you're interested in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do this presentation. It's about 25 or 30 minutes long. There's a video in the middle of it that I'm going to show you. And once we get through that, I'm going to kind of open it up to Q&A. We're going to be able to ask any questions you want about cannabis, about the program, about my trip out to Michigan, whatever you want to do. Just let me know. So without further ado, I'm going to get us started. All right, everybody. So this is from connoisseur to sommelier, taking your cannabis knowledge to the next level with cannabis interpening. First of all, I want everyone to say the word correctly if they can. It's interpening. It's a combination of the words interpreting and terpenes, which is basically what we're doing to determine psychotropic effect. So, give it a try if you want. Interpening, interpening, interpining, interpening. A lot of people say it a lot of different ways, but it's interpening. So there's that. And now that we got that out of the way, we're going to kind of look at two different things in this program. First, we're going to talk about what the need for interpening is. Like, why does it exist? Why do we have it? What's important about it? And then after we kind of get through that, we'll take a look at interpening, the art of interpening. We'll do the bud structure section of it, which is just one of many different things that we look at to determine indica-sativa ratio and psychotropic effects. So basically, if you guys know what a sommelier is, they're, trained, knowledgeable wine professionals. They're really, really well-versed in all aspects of wine, whether it's service, the history, knowing pairings, things of that nature, how wine is made, the processes. These are the people that can do it all. And, really that's what we're hoping that interpreters become. We use sight and scent to gauge cannabis safety, quality, and indica-sativa ratio in order to predict the psychotropic effects. We're also looking at the smells and the flavors, and we're doing pairings and things like that. And, becoming an interpreter can actually lead to a lot of really cool opportunities. Eventually, if you go through level 1 with me and then go out to Colorado and do level 2, once you become a level 2 interpreter, you can start reaching out to the Trichome Institute. And, we have opportunities to do things like grade cannabis at cannabis cups with our TAG Trichome Assurance Grading System. I utilize my status as an interpreter here in Illinois to help gain some recognition and do product reviews for cultivators. So I get gifted a lot of product here in Illinois in exchange for doing some videos and photos and stuff like that. And, just so you can see, like here I am doing some grading. It is pretty labor intensive. It takes a long time. This is probably 2 hours of video altogether with, seeing, smelling, smoking, and then doing the data entry at the dope cup. So, it is work, and but at the end of the day, it's a lot of fun. And so, when we talk about sommeliers, we talk about beer cicerones or cheesemongers or cuppers. All of these things are dealing with just the enjoyment of the product, okay? And that's fine, and that's important. And we want to make sure people enjoy cannabis as well, especially in an adult use market, which we're hoping is going to be coming to Michigan soon. But in addition to the enjoyment of the product, interpreters are also talking about the medical effect. And knowing what terpenes and what scent combinations provide what effect, and becoming well versed in essentially the art of aromatherapy is essentially one of the ways to utilize cannabis for medicinal purposes, and to know what the cannabis is going to do for somebody without knowing anything else about it except seeing it and smelling it. And so that is the art of the cannabis sommelier. But the reason we need to do that, and we need to be able to do that, is because strain names are inaccurate, unreliable, often enough that it's a problem. Okay. So when you look at this jar of cannabis, like, how do we know it's Purple Dream? And what is Purple Dream? Is it Purple Urkel with Blue Dream? Or is it, OG Perps or Granddaddy Perps and Blue Dream? Or is there not even any Blue Dream in there at all? So who knows why it was named the way it was? And what can you do about that, right? So that's the strain name dilemma, right? And it exists for a number of reasons. The black market, right? Or illegal market, excuse me. Maybe I should change the writing on there, but we're trying to get away from black and white market just because of the racial connotations. But that being said, the illegal market, forced cannabis cultivators underground for decades. And there was a lot of secrecy. There was theft. There was competition. People stole strains and changed the names so that they didn't know that's what was being sold. And, people find seeds and they think it's from one source, but it's actually from another. And the result is a mishmash of cannabis strain names that are often unreliable. They don't make sense. There's no naming convention to any of it, right? People just name it based on what they're inspired to call it at that time, and it's up to the grower, and it's kind of like the grower's signature. And that's really cool. And I love that part of the culture of cannabis, but that makes it really difficult for people to consistently get the same product over and over again when we're talking about it from a medicinal standpoint. And because the cannabis plants had to come from somewhere, all the legal industries are built on plants that were at one point illegal, or their ancestors were illegal. So, it's important to keep that in mind. There's additional, complications like cannabis morphology and counterfeiting in the law. And if you don't know what that is, cannabis morphology is really, really cool. The cannabis plant is able to basically express itself differently based on the environment it grows in. Okay, so you can take two identical plants and grow them in different systems, and they'll be different, strains or different variety types at the end. There'll be different phenotypes of the same genetics. One place that you can actually check this out, if you're interested, on Instagram, some friends of mine out in Colorado have a growing competition called the Grow Off. It's at the Grow Off. And what the Grow Off is one cultivator submits a bunch of clones and gets a mama plant. And about 100 different cultivators get one clone each, and they all have the opportunity to grow this plant and make the best cannabis they can. And they submit it at the end and see who's the best. The variation in what these ultimate buds looked like in terms of shape and a little bit of coloration was really, really cool. So definitely go check that out. There's ultimately 40 different buds that were entered. And, it's kind of like, imagine if a family had 40 kids, right? And you're looking at all these brothers and sisters, like they're all individual different people, obviously. But when you take a step back, you can tell they're from the same family. And that's kind of what this is. You can kind of tell they're all from the same family, right? But they're all a little bit different, and they all are going to treat you a little bit different. And that's something that's really important to understand about cannabis consumption. The other issue is counterfeiting. Blue Dream is an incredibly popular strain in cannabis, and therefore a lot of people are selling Blue Dream. Are they all growing Blue Dream? Are they all growing the same Blue Dream? How do we know? In fashion, the fake purses, fake sunglasses, fake watches, all that stuff, $461 billion a year industry of fakes. So, keep that in mind next time somebody tells you they got, Blue Dream or Golden Goat or something popular. It's very likely that it's not what it is. And so what can be done to solve this problem? Well, some of the more serious cultivators, I guess you could say, are trying to register the DNA genetic structure of their plants to make sure that they're the only people that are growing it, or you have to get a license from them to grow it. And one way that they're figuring out where these, genes are in relation to each other across plants is with a company called Phylos. And we're going to watch a video from them in a quick second here. But Phylos Bioscience, they are undertaking this task of basically genetically mapping any strain that comes into them and then putting that on a map that looks like a universe that can show people where it is in relation to other strains and what if it's named the right thing. So we'll check that out in a quick second. But what else we can do is if you like a strain and you know what cultivator it comes from, only buy that cultivator's version because they're probably not changing it around. Okay. If you get it from a different cultivator or a different dispensary, or you don't know who the growers are, that's an issue. So always ask who the cultivator is and always get that cultivator strain. The other thing you can do is learn interpening and know for yourself. And ultimately, by seeing and smelling these strains, you're going to know whether or not it's the one that you want, right? And so that's what we want to teach you how to do. We also want to teach you how to interpret, shapes and sights and scents so that if it's not the one you want, you can determine whether or not it's a suitable replacement. So that's kind of what you'll learn more of in the entire class. We're going to look at just bud structure today for that. But here's a video I want y'all to check out real quick.
So if you go online, it's just this three-dimensional map. You can zoom around in it. You can play with it. You can search for things. And now different growers and different dispensaries have their own constellations in there. Some dispensaries are finally starting to send letters to their suppliers saying, if you want to have stuff in our store, you have to get it tested because we want our patients to know what they're getting. So the idea was kind of that we would be able to build this huge data set and answer some really difficult questions if we could solve a market problem, if we could create a demand for consistency or meet the demand for consistency. And it's working. People are sending us tons of samples. Those samples aren't the rare, interesting ones. They're the industry samples. And so we're trying to tease apart all that mess. And the bigger the data set gets, the more we can tell people with certainty what they really have. These are just the names that everything came in with. We can see that at least 30% of the names are wrong or nonsensical, but people are already starting to log on and change the names. People send us samples of different things often, and we find out that actually they have the same thing. People are using it to settle disputes even, which I'm not sure how I feel about, but you can definitely do kind of a, like a DNA paternity test and figure out, if your buddy really took a cutting from you and is selling it in Washington State or not. You can figure that out. So one problem with this data inherently is that it's just complicated data. So if you zoom in on certain parts of the galaxy and you turn on all the relationship lines, you can't even see some of the names. Like, it's so dense. Like, this is the actual data. The dots are separated by genetic distance. The lines are first degree relationships, either parent-child or sibling-sibling. And there's so many varieties that it's such a tangle. And the reason for that is that there's no such thing as a strain. So people talk about seed lines and clonal lines. And there are clonal varieties. If you have a plant that's good and you take cuttings from it, all of those cuttings will be genetically identical. That's a variety. But in normal agriculture, people have made genetically stable plants. And all our children are the same. No one's ever done that for cannabis. So when you cross a male and a female cannabis plant, the seeds that you get are unique individuals, just like all of us. They are as different from each other as you are from your siblings. So all of these dots are individuals. They're not strains. It's just one plant. It's genetically used. So every plant is its own special snowflake with its own crazy chemical diversity. So it's just a really, really complicated data problem. So here in Israel, as we learned in the last couple of days, they have this weird insistence on doing things correctly, and so they actually are doing experiments to figure out what's in the plant and how does it work. We can't do that in the United States because research is still basically illegal. So what we're doing is collecting tons and tons of data. We're comparing it with patient data and chemical data. There's this massive nationwide experiment going on, and hundreds of thousands of people are using this plant. So ultimately, we're going to be able to not just figure out what are you smoking, but we're going to be able to figure out what genes control what traits, and ultimately, we're going to be able to figure out what genes and traits are related to what patient outcomes by mining all that data. And that's it.
So that's pretty cool. And, you know, keeping that in mind and understanding that, you know, 30% of the time or more that you're getting a product that strain name is not actually what it is, if it actually has a strain name. So that being said, let's take a look at interpening with bud structure. We're going to kind of basically talk about some plant basics. I want to first kind of introduce the concept of how leaf structure and plant structure are a result of the growing environment. And then I want to talk about how nodal spacing is a result of plant structure, and then how bud structure is a result of nodal spacing. So we're going to kind of dive that deep into the physical characteristics of the plant for you. Basically, you know, if you look at where cannabis comes from, you know, we can kind of cross off ruderalis. It's way up north. It's the redheaded stepchild of the cannabis industry. But sativas, you know, more open, arid, mountainsides, things like that. While indicas are coming more from the dense, lush tropics and those kinds of places. So keeping that in mind, you know, you look at the indica plant and the sativa plant there. And, you know, that indica plant's probably 6 feet tall. The sativa plant's probably 12. So thinking about that, when you're growing in a jungle, you're a plant growing in a jungle, there's a canopy of trees above you. I was actually watching Planet Earth the other day, and David Attenborough said that only 5% of the light from the sky reaches the jungle floor. And so, you know, that's why these indica leaves are so broad. That's the plant's solar panels, right? The more surface area it has, the better job it can do at collecting light. So that was its genetic advantage to collecting light in low light conditions. And then it's really compact and dense and bushy because there's so many other plants around and it's competing for space. Now, the sativa plant, on the other hand, you know, growing in these open, arid, wispy, windy conditions, things are more open, things are able to stretch out, there's not as many plants around, and it's being bombarded with light. You know, there's nothing covering it. So the leaves were able to get really thin, and, you know, if they're turned at the right angle, they might not collect any light at all. So, you know, the original growing condition of where a genetic variety type originated is going to kind of play into what its capabilities are in terms of being thin-fingered, thick-fingered, you know, tall and open, or short and bushy. And if you talk to some growers in the commercial setting, you know, they'll mention that some of their indicas and sativas, after a while, they all kind of start tasting the same, smoking the same, giving the same kind of effects, because they're all grown under the same, you know, environment over and over again, from the same clonal line. So I think, you know, personally, the best grows are the ones that have individual rooms for individual genetics and let them grow according to what's best to them. But, you know, taking a closer look now, indica plant on the left, sativa plant on the right, you know, the nodal spacing is really tight for the indica, the nodal spacing is really open for the sativa, and as a result, you know, the sativa, the buds can be open and wispy and light and fluffy, while the indicas, you know, there's not very much room. You know, as those calyxes stack up and the calyx stack up and they become more heavy and dense buds, they don't have a lot of room to grow. They can't expand, so they just become harder and firmer and more chunky, right? So, you know, to show you that, you know, here's an indica bud, and I'm going to kind of click up the spectrum of hybridization one notch at a time, indica dominant. So we went from really dense and round to very dense, but starting to become a little more conical. You know, there's a spot where you can kind of see into the bud a little bit there. And then a hybrid, you know, even more conical, a few more spots that you can see into it. Sativa dominant, right? Starting to be really open, really cone shaped. You can really see in there. And then finally the sativa, really open, really wispy. The bud structure is light and fluffy, and this is actually a really interesting Thai landrace strain. So here I want you guys to see that again. You can kind of see it when we go fast. You can see it open up even better sometimes. You know, sativa down to indica. One more time slow. It's an indica dominant there, or excuse me, indica dominant, hybrid, sativa dominant, and sativa. Okay, and so that's kind of the visual representation of why, you know, the buds grow a different shape with the close nodal spacing and the open nodal spacing. And in addition to being able to tell us, you know, cannabis interpening is not just about the variety type, it's also about the quality, right? So, you know, we can tell if there's malformed cannabis, if something's bad, we know it's stressed out, we know that it messes with the growing process. And those stresses can include lighting or temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide levels, the nutrients, you know, the soil mix, insects, diseases, and a whole lot more things. So, you know, when buds are under stress, it's a good thing because they form more chemical defenses, which are cannabinoids and terpenes, and we take advantage of those. But if we stress them out too much, then bad things start happening to the plant, and that's when we start getting, you know, faulty bud structure, is what we call it. And so here's two different examples of faulty bud structure. On the left, when we cut that bud off the plant, it was a whole bud. And as it cured and dried, it just fell apart. It couldn't even hold on to itself. That's how poorly, you know, developed that bud was. And on the right, you know, these things are all holding together, but look at the shape. Look at the coloration. I mean, it's really weird and odd, and that's not how cannabis is supposed to form. Like, what happened to those really nice buds that we were looking at before? You know, so that's just something to keep in mind. And, you know, here's kind of everything that you would learn in the level 1 interpening class. You know, we're going to be talking about cannabis quality, cannabis aroma, potency and trichome density. We'll go through the entire interpening methodology, talk more about the strain name dilemma. We'll talk about, you know, the genetics of cannabis and what the indica sativa spectrum really is. And if it's something you're interested in, you know, level 1's a prereq for level 2, and you have a 35 question test that you have to pass, 28 out of 35 passes, and then you're eligible to go take level 2. And level 1 is kind of the theory, and you have to demonstrate that you understand the theory behind what we're talking about. And then level 2 is in Colorado, and it's really cool. And after a hands-on class and lecture where you're going to get to go through over 100 jars of cannabis and see indicas and indica dominants and hybrids and sativa dominants and sativas, you're also going to get to, you know, see jar rot and botrytis and powdery mildew and male flower sites and all sorts of faulty bud structure and nutrient burns and those kinds of things. So we want to prepare you to then be able to demonstrate that you can do this skill. And there's 10 jars, and you're told 5 of these jars are consumable, and one of them is an indica, one's an indica dominant, one's a 50-50, one's a sativa dominant, one's a sativa, and the other 5 each have a unique problem, and you got to let us know what the problem is. And each jar's worth 6 points, and you got to get 50 out of 60 points to pass. So I want to show you guys a couple things real quick as well. Just going to grab a couple things from my bag here. So, you know, you're going to get some tools along with your purchase of the class. And I'm actually out of our weed wheels right now. And this isn't accurate, but we are going to be having class on 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4, like I said, in Michigan. And let's see. Stop sharing now. Okay, so That's kind of the end of the presentation there. And now that I got you guys, I just want to show you, this is your interpening loop that you're going to get. This thing's really cool. This helps you identify indica sativa ratio. You can open it up a few different times and it gets back to the beginning, but this is indica sativa ratio. This is cannabis quality. This is bad characteristics of cannabis. And then the last one is terpenes and what they mean. So definitely something to check out. And then you're going to get a weed wheel. Like this is our hash and concentrate wheel. This is another tool we have. This shows you about different hash and concentrates. And we basically have one of these for cannabis that is indica sativa ratios. And then, oh, actually I do have one. Here's a weed wheel right here. This is perfect. So here's our weed wheel. Okay, so this shows you your indica sativa ratio. And then you get a 42-page guidebook. And this is, Trichome Institute materials. This is really cool. It shows you through all the good, the bad, and the ugly. And, when you pass the test, you get a pin. And then if you go to Colorado and do level 2, there's a cooler pin and a cooler pin for level 3. So, that is the webinar. I really appreciate you guys, ladies, hanging out and, hearing what I had to say. And at this point, if you have any questions or want to talk about anything, go ahead and type it in the chat box. So I was just typing there that if you want to find the class schedule, you can go to cannabiseducation.co/enroll. And you just click on that, just navigate over to February, and you'll see on 2/2 at 5 p.m. we're in Detroit at the Cannabis Council. On 2/3 at noon, we're at Greengate Health in Grand Rapids. And on 2/4 at noon, we're at the Lansing Market. Hi, can these certifications be used to gain employment in the legal industry in Illinois? That's a good question, Marissa. And here's what I'll say about that. Furthering your education and understanding of cannabis will help you get more employment in any state because you'll be able to discuss things with potential employers at a really articulate level. Unfortunately, there's no Harvard degree in the cannabis industry, and anybody who tells you that they have a certification that will get you a job is lying to you. My certification is something that is really cool and really fun and really useful, and it will enhance your resume. But more importantly, what it's going to do is give you the knowledge and understanding to truly be able to tap into your cannabis world and help people with it. And I think that's the most important part about getting a job in any industry. And I've worked in the industry here in Illinois, and if you want some help figuring out how to do that, I'd be happy to help you. I have classes in Illinois. I got them in Chicago, in addition to Michigan. So check out the schedule. There's one. I got one in Chicago coming up on February 24th. I hope to see you guys and you ladies in class one day. How does sponsorship work? You saw that slide. So, with this run that we have coming up in Michigan, we were hoping that we might get a business to sponsor the classes, and they'd be able to get their products out and connect with people in our classes in exchange for some money that we could use for marketing. We've got a few different sponsorship levels, like I think $500, $1,000, and $1,500, and they include, entries to the class and stuff. So you get, a couple $100 of value per entry, and you can kind of write it off in that way if you want. But I'm open to doing the same thing here in Chicago as well, in Illinois. So if you work for a company that's interested in connecting with people in the cannabis industry or cannabis enthusiasts. I come across a lot of them when I do my classes, when I'm out doing events. I do a bunch of free events on the south side of the city now. So if that's something that you or a team that you're on want to capitalize on, include any questions you have on that in your email to me, and we can discuss them there. Well, in that case, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you very much for coming, and I really hope to see you all in class one day. Let me know if I can answer any more questions for you. Feel free to email me anytime. Take care.